right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming down. We are live from Books and Books in Coral Gables, Florida, so hello to our internet audience tuning in from the four corners of the globe. This is a very special afternoon. We always love having our friends from the FIU Creative Writing Department here. This is yet another in a series of group readings we have with alumni from the Creative Writing Department at Florida International University. Our featured readers this afternoon will be Marcy Calabreta Canciobello, Tim Curtis, and Jeanette Delgado, Cecilia Fernandez, Louis Lowy, Julio Machado, Fabian Silvia Josephat, and Laura Valeri. And here to pick up the rest of the hosting duties for us, please welcome to the microphone a good friend of FIU. I like to think she's a friend of mine as well. She's a professor of poetry and creative nonfiction at Florida International University, Ms. Julie Marie Wade.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We're so grateful that you are. I have the privilege every year around this time of introducing returning alums to read from new work, from thesis work, from brand new books. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first reader. I do want to remind you to stay afterwards, buy books if you like, have them signed, join us for the reception following. Our first reader today is Marcy Calabreta Canciobello. She is the author of the poetry collection Last Train to the Midnight Market. She has been awarded a Kundiman Asian American Poetry Fellowship, a John S. and James L. Knight Fellowship, and the Academy of American Poets Prize. She is the editor-in-chief of Print-Oriented Bastards, assistant editor for High Line Magazine, and a contributing editor for Florida Book Review. Her work has appeared in American Letters and Commentary, The MacGuffin, and other journals. Please welcome Marcy.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you all for coming and supporting the alumni as we venture off into the great, wild world. I'm going to read 3 poems. They're not very long, so patience. As poets, of course, every word counts, right? But because we're all kind of nerds, too, we also like words that don't really exist, like this one. This poem is called From the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. We were told our bones were too heavy to lift, even when latticed together with feathers. You stopped eating and learned to scowl, while I folded birds into paper and flung them across yards already littered with light. You read how hummingbirds tuck themselves into the plumage of Canadian geese, so I held you against my breast as we fell from the darkest pines. Each night you dreamed of crooked trees, thin seams tearing apart in the sky. You found a word in the dictionary of obscure sorrows upon which to hang our failures, mapiohansia, the disappointment of being unable to catch wind currents in your arms. Together we chanted the syllables as if each vowel could bear the weight of our living. So these are all thesis poems. So some of you have heard them before and some of you haven't. My thesis is set in Korea on the island of Jeju, where the famous pearl divers run the economy. So this is from the perspective of one of the pearl divers. Restitution for the grandson. If in the hour of the ox you had passed from your own bright life into ours, or perhaps if your mother had begged more fervently for you during the springtide, when the sea cannot help but give and give for its fullness, even if you had not been born in the ruinous hour of the bore, as the shore emptied its cupped hands back into the breakers of neap tide, if your father had not shut himself up with the bark and bone of small forests, had instead cultivated patriarchies tenderly and fiercely, if and yet. Here I stand, lifting my net, slinging into the sea from this precipice your sister's scrolls, your mother's oath, the spent cockleshells of clams, insufficient recompense for what the sea asks us to return. So food. It's almost dinner time. I'm thinking about that. I always put food in my poems if I can. And so this poem is because I miss Korean food very much. Old Country, New World. Although my sweaters were already rolled and tacked around stone cooking pots, packages of dried flat squid and fish in a borrowed half-centuried suitcase, Mama burned a bouquet of candles that last night, plucking pearls from the cold bowl of water to string on waxed threads. I said, Americans do not barter. Everything costs exactly what it says. In silence, she clipped each loose end carefully, close to the knots, with large ancient shears. Although I did not know it, Mama sewed pearls into my skin, each vertebra, each tooth and eyelash, stitched in salt lace dew and the ash of incanted incense, strung with the thread of old blood. She said white is funerary back home. Red is for good luck, still unraveling in her hands and across her lap. Entire tapestries between us. Mama, don't miss me. I will eat enough. I said to the phone because I did and didn't, could still taste desire taut as the skin of an umbrella over its ribs. Here, darkness is pinned back like long black hair from the phosphorescence of this new city. Enormous apples, umbral faces, 1,000 languages in the same breath. Even the air spins its own guttural songs in coral and gold, malachite green and porcelain blue. Of all the colors oiled into the crow's feathers, only their throats are crimson. Once more, I roll my tongue over the old grain of longing, patient as an oyster with its seed. Thank you.
Second reader this afternoon is Tim Curtis. Tim Curtis wrote his first complete sentence 7 years ago. He was so excited, he immediately signed up for evening classes at Miami-Dade College. 2 years later, he joined John Dufresne's Friday Night Writers Group. Thanks to spell check and the feedback he received from the group, Tim was accepted into Florida International University's creative writing program the following year. Last fall marked his 6th year attending Friday Night Writers and his 4th year in FIU's 3-year MFA program. When Tim isn't busy rewriting his awesome comedic novel, Life is Good, If But Briefly, he dabbles in short stories and poetry. Please welcome Tim Curtis.
Good evening. I'd planned on reading the entire novel today. People frowned upon that plan, so I'm going to read 4 poems. Or 3 if I get the right feedback. If those starving kids are so goddamn hungry, then why don't they eat those flies crawling around their face? Starving people aren't wringing their skinny, big-knuckled hands over global warming. Hungry people don't care about genetically altered crops, MSG, art, interior design, fashion, sex, or American politics. And they could give a flying fuck about the modern versus postmodern debate. Hungry people are agitated. Starving people, they're docile. Hungry people don't clip coupons from the Sunday paper. That's poor people. Hungry people don't join gyms or abide by the 5-second rule. Too sick to be tricked by the ploy of a plastic toy. Starving kids deem any meal a happy meal. Organic, fresh frozen, canned, or day old? Ain't no big deal when your knees are as big as your head. Choosing between an iPod and a bologna sandwich is a no-brainer when you're starving. Hungry people don't want flat-screen TVs, but they'd be thrilled with a flat stack of pancakes. Offer starving a Muslim the choice between 72 virgins or 21 white raisins, and they'll take the raisins every time. No starving Italian is going to refuse tutumari just because some idiot put formaggio on it. Concentration camps made keeping kosher irrelevant. Skinny isn't sexy when you're starving. Starving guys aren't concerned about the size of their dicks or the quality of their erections. Starving women don't fuss over their orgasms, get their tits fixed, and they know better than to ask if that dress makes their ass look fat. Don't expect a lot of sympathy from a starving person when you tell them how unsettling it was when your first choice school rejected you, your best friend fucked your boyfriend, or you couldn't find those designer overpriced jeans in your size. Being labeled special or gifted doesn't mean jack when you're starving. Hungry people don't ask Santa for another stupid holiday sweater with reindeers on it or insulated socks with batteries. No, they want their goddamn milk and cookies back. If you thought that bikini wax job or goofy tramp stamp tattoo hurt, then you don't want any part of starving. Starving teens don't struggle with anorexia, bulimia. They don't throw pizza pajama parties, and they don't rent limos for the prom. When we say we're starving, we have no fucking idea what we're talking about. And those kids with distended stomachs and flies around their mouths, shit, they never got a penny for the use of their image. My baby. My baby's got bedroom eyes and butterball thighs, red lips, big round hips. My baby's got a rockin' bottom and a jiggly top. She's got her head in the clouds, her feet in the sand, and her eye on her man. She likes a low-fast car, fruit from a jar, and dark, smoky bars. My baby's got a cool, hot vibe, purrs like a lion, smells like a peach, prefers high heels, short skirts. My baby don't cook, but she can singe the sheets. My baby don't want no rhythm with her blues, no cream on her coffee, no sugar on her pops. She likes butter on her toast, jelly on her rolls, and jam on her man. My baby struts, my baby strolls, my baby rolls. My baby drinks, my baby fights, my baby bucks when she fucks. My baby's long, my baby's lean, my baby's mean. My baby's ass is hot, but her heart is cold. My baby did a bad thing. She left her bra in another man's car and her panties behind the neighborhood bar. Thank you. It's okay to laugh. Laughter becomes you. How to achieve peace in our lifetime. Or, the peace train ran over my legs, and I've got this bloody fucking polyblend t-shirt to prove it. Wear tie-dyed tank tops and hot pants. Show the troops your tits for peace. Recycle your beer cans and yard clippings in the name of peace. Donate your broke-down VW and that board game that's missing some pieces to the peace cause. Put a stick in your mouth and bite down hard. Poke yourself in the eye, run around flapping your silly flimsy arms for peace. Undergo electric shock therapy, pierce your nipples, dedicate your next elective surgery to the peace movement. Watch porn for peace. We're not sure how this works, but can we really afford to take a chance? If you love peace, you'll enjoy our product. Support the child laborers that produce all those peace buttons by buying more goddamn buttons. Swallow a condom for peace. Snort peace. Put it on your gums. Put some on your penis. Fuck peace. Outlaw public gatherings. Break treaties. Twist arms. Crack some bones in the name of peace. Buy a fucking gun. Join the NRA for your own peace of mind. Maintain the precarious peace by packing a partially concealed weapon. Drink bong water, hit a helium balloon, and scat croon the Star-Spangled Banner for peace. Slap some bitches for peace. Honk if you're down with peace. Talk your fucking head off for peace. Wave a flag for peace. Want more peace? Shit, wave a bigger flag. If you're counting, this is the last one. All the best. May your deodorant and best friend let you down when you need them most. May every line you stand in be the slow line. Every item require a price check. May the hammer forever strike your thumb, and your trick knee play tricks on you. May you become bloated and gassy, get diarrhea, while stuck in traffic. Require weekly colonoscopies. Your hospital gown remain open and the wind forever at your back. May your public restroom stall have no toilet paper other than the piece stuck to the sole of your shoe. And may your depend adult undergarment make your skinny jeans puffy. May you experience a burning sensation every time you urinate. May you achieve an erection lasting longer than 4 minutes. And may your vanity prevent you from seeking immediate medical attention. May the hair on your head fall out in clumps, and the hair on your back grow long and silky. May you get pink eye in your right eye and dry eye in your left eye. Acquire a chronic case of the sniffles, a mild headache that won't go away, and may a restful night's sleep forever elude you. May you suffer paper cuts, athlete's foot and hammer toe, gingivitis and halitosis, shingles, hives and prickly heat, anal warts, jock itch, and chlamydia from your wife. May every stray dog find your gravestone more enticing than a fire hydrant. May you continue to wear your silly Christmas sweater, the one with the gilded reindeer, and your reading glasses on the tip of your nose, and peer over them, thinking it adds an air of professorial inquisitiveness to your pretentious demeanor. May you live long enough to speak gibberish, yet remain lucid enough to realize just how foolish you sound. Thank you.
Our third reader today is Anjanette Delgado. She is a Puerto Rican novelist, journalist, and TV producer. She writes about heartbreak and lives in Miami with her husband Daniel and her mini Dashin Chloe. Her first novel, The Heartbreak Pill, was published in 2008 and received the Latino International Book Award for Best Romance in English. Her new novel, The Clairvoyant of Calle Ocho, was published earlier this month by Kensington Books. Welcome, Anjanette.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So good to be home. And by home, I mean books and books. There must be a cot for me somewhere because I spend so much time here. So, is that good? Okay. Sorry. I first want to thank the best teachers in the world, the teachers from the creative writing program at FIU. We all owe them so much. They're around there somewhere, I know. So I'm going to talk to you about affairs. I wrote this chapter of the novel thinking about how do we get into love affairs, extramarital affairs. How does that happen? Do we just decide to do it on a whim? Have we been thinking about it a long time? Can we really decide not to? Is that real? So anyway, here goes. And it's exactly that stupid fear of being over, finished, thrown out that creates the misery of our mistakes. It's also how notorious number 4 came to be part of my list. Well, that and the bookstore and the real estate slump of 2008. It was during the preceding fall of 2007 that Hector, being an extremely intelligent and strategic man, convinced his wife to sell their home in the character-rich, then value-poor neighborhood of the Roads, which they did just before the bubble burst. This way, he'd explained, they'd be able to save their bookstore and turn their equity into cash, otherwise irrecoverable later. The following fall, in October 2008, they moved into my building. Had I not been in the middle of catching husband number 2 with the yoga teacher at about the same time, a man who'd sell his house before he closed down a bookstore would have been an aphrodisiac too strong to resist for me. Now, it's true that Hector first came to see the apartment with his wife, Olivia, but he later returned alone to sign the lease and pay his first month's rent, bringing a book and a chocolate souffle with him as a landlord gift. Thank you. I thought the landlord's the one who welcomes the tenants with a housewarming gift, I said. Oh, you have been more than welcoming. You're obviously an incredibly warm woman, not to mention a beautiful one. So what else can I do but bring you gifts? I'd seen right through him. Pompous, oversexed, and with a wife who scared the wits out of me. Always silent, smiling that superior, crazy half smile. I thanked him for the souffle, told him he could return the signed lease later, closed the door, and didn't give it another thought beyond Fool, please. I am not in the mood for people with penises right now. For a while, all was calm. I had a couple of short affairs not even worth including in my list. I didn't ask anyone for help, and I didn't encourage any man to ask it of me. I was completely alone, no family, no friends, and no real relationships besides my tenants and the people of Coffee Park. Time passed, and Manuel passed, and Jorge came and left, and more time passed. And then one day, when I was finally tired of being almost 40, and I could feel the loneliness in my bones like mold, he returned. It wasn't cold that early Miami morning in February when he knocked on my door. Still, he wore a coat and scarf because, as I later learned, he always dressed for the season regardless of where he was. Good afternoon, Mariela. So sorry to disturb you, he said when I answered with his precise diction and his thick Argentinian accent. It's okay. Something wrong in your apartment? Oh, no. I just need a copy of my lease. I seem to have misplaced it. Oh, okay. Well, come on in and I'll print you one. As I looked for the lease on my computer, he strolled casually into my kitchen. Where do you keep the coffee? Ah, here it is. I thought we'd share some coffee while I'm here. He explained when he saw I'd followed him into the kitchen with a pen between my lips and a startled look on my face. I'm sorry, he said then, looking sheepish. Am I being too familiar? I always do this. I'm such a boludo. How you say, a jackass. I get the story chemistry and there's no stopping me. The story chemistry? You love stories, don't you? He said, pointing to my large book collection, which took up half the wall space in my small living room and could be seen from where he stood in the kitchen. Sure, I said, flattered enough to want him to inspect them, to be impressed by my varied choice of authors, John Barth, Carver, Junot Diaz, Doctorow, Bikram Chandra. Well, I'm sure you've read this one, he said, handing me a book from the inside pocket of his trench. But it is an early edition signed by the author. Very, very valuable. I know you love this book. A woman as beautiful as you has to have this book. Please accept it as a gift. It was Love in the Time of Cholera, which I had read, and from which I only remembered that the object of the protagonist's slightly pedophilic affection had red pubic hair. That's when it happened. And by happened, I mean that I decided. I liked the sight of this man taking off his coat and scarf and getting ready to make coffee for me in my kitchen. I decided to be open to his possibility, to let him happen if he wanted to. He wasn't my problem. He was his wife's, right? Do you want to review the lease with your wife in case you need me to update anything? I asked later, sipping his coffee and wondering if he understood what I was really asking, wanting to be sure he knew the risks of what he'd come for. Oh, no, he sighed like a father talking about a rebellious child. Olivia doesn't deal with these things. She doesn't have problems. She's not on earth long enough to have them or to know when she has one. He finished with a tortured, resigned smile that had obviously seen light before this moment. I nodded, thinking, I knew this game. Hell, maybe I'd invented this game. But I convinced myself his wife either knew and didn't care one bit that she had an obviously unfaithful husband, or didn't know and was happy that way. At least with me, she wouldn't have to worry about his divorcing her and taking her assets with him when he left her. May I ask how old you are? He asked. No, you may not, I laughed. It's just, you remind me of an actress, the mystique of maturity and the smile of youth at the same time. Liscia Maglietta, is her name, Italian. He finished in a way that said he felt if something was Italian, it was undeniably superior. Well, I'm sure Liscia would be mortified, but thank you. And sexy, he said. Mortified and sexy? No, mature and youthful, sexy and innocent, all at the same time. I smiled, busied myself with the book he'd given me. Wow, your books are expensive, I said. Thank you for the gift. I flipped to a page on which he'd placed a cardboard bookmark from his bookstore. There was a handwritten notation on it. I read aloud. Sex is in the brain and begins hours, days, months, sometimes years before the actual lovemaking. Oh, my God, I can't believe I forgot that in there. He took it from me with an embarrassed smile. But it's true, no? Pleasure is a hunger you feed. If your palate is uneducated in these matters, you lunge hungrily, gulp it like cheap wine. But if you're someone who really enjoys making love, then you feed it slowly. Enjoy each morsel you place inside the mouth of your mind. You'll forgive me for being so forward, Mariela. I feel so comfortable in your presence as if I'd known you a long time. Priceless, wasn't he? I could clearly see that he was pretentious, chronically unfaithful, unsatisfied, and possibly given to condescension. But I chose to be ignorant. I chose to be ignorant because I was lonely and bored with life and hungry for the attention I was afraid I'd never get again. I chose him because I was empty, and he seemed like just the thing to fill up for, at least for a little while. I knew exactly what I was doing, and when he left that afternoon, I knew he'd be back.
Our fourth reader this afternoon is Cecilia Fernandez. Cecilia is an independent journalist and college instructor with a passion for literature. Her debut memoir, Leaving Little Havana, a memoir of Miami's Cuban ghetto, was selected as a finalist in the 2011 Breadloaf Writers Conference contest. Her work has appeared in Latina Magazine, Accent Miami, and Vista Magazine, among others. A former reporter for the Stockton Record, the San Francisco Chronicle, and several Miami television stations, Cecilia teaches writing and literature at University of Miami, Barry University, and Broward College. Please welcome Cecilia.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this. And like Anjanette said, without the professors from FIU, the creative writing program, this would never have been published. They were so helpful as editors and advisors, and I want to thank them all. This took many years to write, about 7, and this was the full time that I was in the MFA program. And it's the story, there are 3 narratives involved. Obviously, it's my personal narrative, and in the background are the histories of 2 nations, and this little section is where all 3 voices intersect, which is really throughout the whole book. So here goes. Withering weeds poked out from the parched soil all over the front yard. Ellen and I sidestepped broken clay pots and dodged brittle branches from craggy trees as we made our way to the wide double doors of a ramshackle house set back at least 100 yards from the street. Ellen, new in school, told me she ran away from her parents in Illinois and had just moved into this commune on Miller Road in Coral Gables, about a mile from the University of Miami. She wore her blonde hair down to her waist, a beaded suede vest, and long, stained skirt. Definitely a hippie. I was curious about her lifestyle and didn't refuse when she invited me home. It was 1971, and we were both 17. After the death of my grandparents, more alone than ever, I felt wild, crazy, ready to do anything, craving sensation. They were one of the last ties to the rule and regulation-ridden Cuban culture that fell on me like a heap of stones, anchored me in place. None of my friends rejected it like I did, and I didn't know anyone else who was curious about the hippie lifestyle. I pictured American culture as fluid, open. Nevertheless, I felt like an outsider in both places. Not only was I a marginalized Cuban immigrant, but I also lived on the outskirts of traditional Little Havana. I wanted wholeness. Was it impossible to unify these 2 selves? Inside Helen's house, a spacious living room welcomed us with mattresses shoved up against the walls, huge pillows and blankets covering the floor. Black lights glowed from every lamp, and psychedelic posters blazed from the walls. Flowered curtains served as doors to a row of small bedrooms. Heavy incense hung in the air, forming masses of clouds in the dim light, colliding with the sharp odor of marijuana. Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin howled nonstop from an 8-track cassette player on the floor. Ellen disappeared down a hall, and a man walked up to me. He wore hip-hugging bell-bottom jeans held up with a wide leather belt and a buckle in the shape of a peace sign. His scrubby t-shirt hung limply on his thin frame. "You want a drag?" He handed me a joint. "I was here because I wanted to shed that heavy cloak of Cubanness, step past the barriers, and experience what? Anything but boredom." The smoke seared my lungs just like that first time with Ovi, my boyfriend. But now I felt a slight dizziness and floating sensation. I coughed several times. The man, much older than me, motioned me to one of the small rooms. My heart was beating and I fell short of breath. We sat on a dirty, sheetless, sagging mattress in silence. He handed me a water pipe. I put it to my lips and blew smoke out, not inhaling, struggling to clear my head from the effect of the joint. Soon, we were making out and rolling around, one on top of the other. Ellen threw herself on the mattress, too. My first experience with spontaneous sex seemed more like a wrestling match than intercourse. For a while, no one knew whose arms or legs were flailing into the air. My heart and soul retreated, but my body continued to function as the nameless man penetrated me, and I reached out to Ellen, who was on her knees right next to my head. As my hips gyrated, my mouth locked with hers. Everything felt unnatural. Another woman announced her presence by rapping on the walls with a wooden ladle. We jumped apart as she began to pour out lemonade into paper cups from a plastic pitcher and lined them up on the floor. She waved her hands in the air, threw her head back and howled, already tripping on LSD. Worried the hallucinogenic drug would be in the lemonade, I did not drink it. We rapidly pulled on our clothes, and I watched her run out to the common room and gallop around, boomeranging against the walls and yelling. "Wow, she's on a bad trip," Ellen exclaimed, "but we gotta go," she told the man. "We got school tomorrow." The man walked off, taking the pipe. I observed Ellen out of the corner of my eye as I followed her to the station wagon, dented on all sides and with one door caved in. She acted as if nothing unusual had happened. I wanted to be just as cool, so I said nothing. She handed me a Hershey's chocolate bar, and I ate it ravenously. She dug into a bag of chips. I wasn't high anymore, and as we drove, I went over in my mind what I had just experienced. Running off to the commune with Ellen offered a possible escape from Little Havana. But I realized, not the right path for me, at least not then. I enjoyed the music, the fashion, the politics. I didn't want to be a hippie. An interesting story to tell my friends, I thought, if I dared. "See you tomorrow," I said as she dropped me off and screeched away. Ovi, my boyfriend, was in the living room and ran out when he heard the car door slam. I didn't expect him to be there, and I felt a bit nervous. "Where were you?" he shouted in a jealous frenzy. "I was just visiting." "You smell of smoke," he screamed, recognizing the pot smell. "Tell me where you were. Tell me the address. I'm going to find out where you were, what you were doing, and kill them." He grabbed me by the shoulders, eyes protruding. I shook him off. I walked to the kitchen and picked up the phone book. My heart contracted. "Here," I threw the heavy volume in his direction. "Find the address yourself." Ovi jumped in his car with the phone book and drove off. The next morning he called and we made up. But Ellen was not at school that day. She had no phone, so I couldn't find out her whereabouts, and I didn't really want to go back to that house. I never saw her again. That's it. Thank you very much for having me.
We have 4 more readers this afternoon. I just need to verify, is Laura Valeri here? Has anyone seen her? We may only have 3 more readers, so I just want to be sure. All right, someone let me know if she's here. Our 5th reader will be Fabienne Sylvia Josephat, who is the author of Requiem pour Nice, a novel published in Nice, France in 2002. Her short stories have appeared in the Masters Review, Mandala Journal, Small Axe Literary Journal, and the Caribbean Writer. Fabienne recently graduated with a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from Florida International University. She is teaching English composition and creative writing and shopping her first novel in English. Please welcome Fabienne. Oh, there you are.
Thank you. I also want to thank the wonderful professors at FIU in the creative writing department. I have to say that you guys brought out the best in me. I didn't know that I could do so much with writing. I thought writing was all about fiction because that's what I am mainly, but I didn't realize, for example, that I could write nonfiction, which is what I want to read today. So I want to take the time to thank you from the bottom of my heart. The piece that I want to write today, I've workshopped at Friday Night Writers, so if John Dufresne is here, he knows the story. And so this is about growing up in Haiti. What you need to know is that I'm approximately 13 years old, and I'm spending a summer that's very boring, doing nothing but writing and learning Spanish with a wonderful woman who came to Haiti from Ecuador, and her name was Sonia. So this is about her. Sonia Augustine taught Spanish in small groups that rotated during the week. I sat with her in the company of 2 other students my age. She had printed packets and taught us the first day about self-introduction. Hola, me llamo Fabienne. ¿Y tú? ¿Cómo te llamas? We listened to recordings and scanned the pages for illustrations of little children meeting for the first time on Calle Cinco, learning to count de las 1 a las 10, and how to compliment each other on our clothes. A mí me gusta tu ropa, I'd repeat, rolling my R's, just like I'd heard it said on the tape. Neil, a chubby chocolate-skinned neighbor, laughed and pointed his pencil at me. That's not how you say it. Why do you say it like that? She's saying it right, Sonia would say, leaning in closer to write me a muy bien on my worksheet. I did everything to get her attention, and if rolling my R's the right way gained her approval, I was even happier. It's ropa, she said, rolling the letter on her tongue, as if it were nothing but a cube of azúcar. She's got the right accent. It was exhilarating being loved by Sonia. Perhaps that was what attracted me to her in the first place, that she was so tender and loving, that she paid attention to details and said the right words to make me feel better. My father lacked encouraging words himself. I had been living in a world without a mother. I was only 7 when she left. Since then, he hardly found it in himself to look at me without contempt. Sonia Augustine was the first woman to walk into the house after she left, illuminating the dark, cobwebbed corners where my mother kept her chair and books. I often wrapped my arms around her, like all the other children, as if we wanted to suckle on the nectar of love that seemed to ooze out of her. And she willingly loved us, hugging us back, kissing our foreheads and leaving traces of thick, fire engine red lipstick on our skin. After lessons, she would walk us back to the front gate of the house to see us off, holding our hands in hers. I love little girls, she laughed. I wish I could have little kids again. What about little boys? Neil asked. Don't you love me? Of course I love you, she said, rubbing his head of curls. It's just that I miss having small children, and girls are so much more reasonable. I wish Sonia had been my mother, and so did my father. Sonia sat on a chair next to my father. Alors tu sais qu'il m'aime, il me caresse les cheveux. She spoke in French, but she was not talking about Julio Augustin, the engineer. No, this conversation was not about her husband. She seemed to be seeking counsel from my father. I couldn't hear everything, but there was another man who loved her, and loved her hair, and loved to touch it, and my father listened. Her whispers filled the room, stirring a cyclone of disappointment, a bad dust storm of memories. I felt the weight of my mother's absence. I pretended to use the guest bathroom and stayed in there a long time after she asked to see him. I wanted to eavesdrop. She had come to ask my father, the only attorney she knew, for advice for a possible divorce. She was in a relationship with another man because her husband was neglectful, irritable, and violent. I listened in, blushing in a small bathroom under the weight of my own guilt. And yet, even with the walls separating us, it was as if I could hear every piece of my father's heart shatter. She was breaking his heart. Didn't she know? Didn't she notice the longing looks he shot her? The way he trusted her blindly with my care? The way he smiled like a schoolboy whenever she flipped that hair from one shoulder to the other? Lastimo. Every time she laughed, he nodded and said nothing, but crossed his legs and pretended to think while rubbing his ankle with the other hand. My father had been lonely since 1986. How long can a man endure the emptiness of a house? One day, your mother will send for you, he explained. Then you'll go and live with her, where there are better schools, and you'll leave me here, all alone with my books. My parents' marriage was broken long before the 1986 coup d'etat shattered their lives. It was a catalyst they'd been secretly wishing for, the edge of the sword that divided them for the rest of their lives. They had become toxic to each other. My mother, disillusioned with the false promises of love she'd read growing up in her Roma à l'eau de rose, her Daphne du Maurier and Barbara Cartland epics of chivalry and passionate love. My father had been no prince, and with this political and social world falling apart around them, she had taken off to America. After she left, the entire household mourned her absence. Cookie, her old, blind, and faithful Pekingese, died in the backyard. The grass shriveled and died, the plants bowed in an irreversible adieu, the hummingbirds disappeared, and the paint chipped off. Termites ate the kitchen cabinet doors, and the entire frame and sill of our doors, and the years cracked our walls. The curtains in the living room smelled of layered dust, and ants crawled out of every crevice. My father's room disappeared in the perpetual darkness of his long sleeps, his blinding migraine headaches, and he surrounded himself with photographs of her, black and white and in color, her frozen smile anchoring the sorrow deeper. I knew what kind of women my father was attracted to. I noticed who he looked at when he drove me to school, how his gaze followed women in tailored suits and dark glasses, how he became overly courteous to them when they crossed the street or made a rough turn. At school, my friends' mothers admired him too. His dark suits, his height. He responded agreeably to them when they laughed, shook their heads, and their hair bounced the right way on their shoulders. These women wore makeup the right way, lots of lipstick, and they spoke a honeyed French. Bonjour, enchanté, they'd say. Madame Chambert, a music teacher, called the house every day, hoping I wouldn't recognize her voice, asking to speak to my father, and on few occasions, addressing me without identifying herself, as if I had no idea who she was and what she was up to, wanting to know if my mother was home, when she would ever return, and whether my father was seeing someone. I would hold the phone, burning with anger, before finding my voice. Who is this? I'd shout into the phone. Who are you? Is this Madame Chambert? Why would you do this to me? I told my father about these episodes. He listened and never got angry. He'd nod and fill his mouth with food and say, okay, don't worry about it. I'll deal with it. 2 days later, after Madame Chambert's last phone call, my father said to me, as I walked past him in the hallway of our house, that phone call you told me about the other day, don't worry about it, okay? I found out who it was and I took care of it. I nodded dumbly, unsure of what he meant. She never called again. My father looked for love in women who, in a way, reminded him of my mother. Only he meant for them to be better, more accomplished, working at some other goal in life than being a nurse and tending to wounds in the elderly in America. Women who ran their own businesses, who were lawyers, well-placed in society, and most of all, a woman who would do so without being his equal. As I grew older, I started to resemble my mother too much, physically, but also in my desire to stand up to him. His ideal woman, I imagine, was submissive, beautiful, quiet, and good in bed, and he had probably invested all his fantasies in Sonia Augustine. Thank you.
Our next reader is Louis K. Lowy. He is a former firefighter whose first published novel, Die Laughing, is a humorously dark sci-fi adventure set in the 1950s of flying saucers, communist paranoia, and live television. He is the recipient of a State of Florida Individual Artist Fellowship. His stories have appeared in, among others, New Plains Review, the MacGuffin Magazine, the Chaffee Review, and most recently in the John Dufresne edited anthology, Everything is Broken. His next novel, Anatomy of a Hue Machine, is scheduled for release in February, and we've recently learned that his MFA thesis novel, Petal, has been accepted for publication by Ascent Publishing. Please welcome Louis.
Thank you. And let me echo what everyone said about not only Books and Books, but the FIU creative writing instructors and the English department. They were all very, very nice to me, and all as the other said, none of these novels would have been finished without their feedback and help. So this is as Julie said, this is Die Laughing. It's a humorously dark sci-fi adventure that takes place in the 1950s. It's the story of Las Vegas comedian Sam E. Lakeside, who's abducted by shape-shifting aliens and forced to participate in their plan to rob the Earth of its oil. This is the opening chapter, and it starts the whole ball rolling. Chapter 1, The Lucky Lounge, 1956. I couldn't trust my wife. That's why we got a divorce. Sammy took a drag of his Pall Mall. He blew a heavy smoke cloud into the dark room. She didn't come home one night, and the next day when I asked her where she was, she said, with her sister Phyllis. I knew she was lying. He sipped from his scotch just long enough for the room to hush, because I spent the night with Phyllis. The crowd burst into laughter. Sid Tate, the drummer of the Sid Tate Quartet, hit double rim shots on his snare, ending it with a smash to his crash cymbal. Sammy glanced to the side of the floor stage and winked at a busty blonde standing behind the curtain wings. She puckered her lips at him. Any of you folks encounter a spaceship yet? He asked. According to the newsreels, they're all around us. He wiggled his fingers above his shoulders and said in a spooky voice, "Wahoo!" The crowd chuckled. A couple of spacemen went to a Mars nightclub, but they left because it had no atmosphere. Sid Tate foot-thumped up-a-dop on his bass drum. Seriously, Sammy said, if an athlete gets athlete's foot, what does an alien get? Mistletoe? He stepped from the floor stage center to the front where an elderly couple was seated. A cobalt spotlight trailed him like a coal car dogging a locomotive. Where are you folks from? Texas, the man said. Texas, Sammy repeated to the audience. A Texas oil baron went to the dentist for a checkup. The dentist said, everything's fine. The baron said, drill anyway, I feel lucky. Laughter floated across the blue velvet walls. What brings you fine folks across the border to Las Vegas? Sammy puffed on his cigarette. We're newlyweds, the old man said. Sammy bugged his eyes and acted as if he had choked on his cigarette smoke. A shriek of laughter echoed from the back of the crowded club. I was in a bar the other day with a fellow of your vintage, he said to the man. The elderly man smiled as the spotlight lassoed the couple and settled back on Sammy. The old man was crying. I said, what's the matter, old-timer? Sammy glanced back at the busty blonde standing in the wings. She waved and licked her maraschino lips. His eyes widened briefly and returned to the couple. The man says, I married a beautiful woman. Sammy smiled at the elderly man's wife. She smiled and leaned into her husband. She's 28 years my junior, built like Gina Lola Brigida, and wants me to make whoopee every night. Geez, I said to the old guy, what are you crying for? Sammy skimmed the crowded room. There was an electric hush. Not even a rock glass was clinking. I got him, he thought. And the old guy says to me, I'm crying because I can't remember where I live. The crowd crowed with laughter. The Sid Tate Quartet hit a soaring C chord. Sammy thought, I hit it out of the park. He shook the elderly couple's hands and said, thanks for being great sports. He grabbed a passing waiter. Give these folks a drink with my compliments. A series of spotlights like scattering UFOs darted across the cheering crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, a voice over a PA said, Mr. Sam E. Lakeside. The audience stood and the cheering renewed itself. Sammy bowed and threw a kiss with his palm. He glanced one more time at the chesty blonde in the wings, but a diminutive, pointy-nosed man in a blue satin suit and a small-brimmed fedora was standing where she had been. Sammy saluted the exuberant crowd with his scotch. As he strutted off stage, the PA voice said, on behalf of the Lucky Lounge and Casino, thank you and enjoy your stay. He walked into the wings towards Sid Tate, who was packing his drumsticks. As he did, he passed the diminutive man, who doffed his hat and smiled at Sammy. Have you seen Mitzi? She was just here, Sammy said to Sid. I wouldn't know, Sid replied. Not since you took my dressing room. I had nothing to do with that. Sure you didn't. Sid briskly walked away. Sore sport, Sammy muttered to himself. Sam, it's your agent. A slim, thin-haired janitor standing by the backstage door said. He handed Sammy the receiver from a wall phone hanging next to him. Doc, he said, I just finished the show. Yeah, I killed him. What do you mean I won't be here next week? But I like this place. Did they dump me? The Steve Allen show? You're kidding me, right? Woohoo! He hopped in a small circle, tangling the cord around his shoulders. Doc, I love you. Unraveling the cord, he added, oh, and Marge, too. Before hanging up the receiver, Sammy grabbed the janitor by the shoulders and said, I'm going to New York, Herky, the Steve Allen show. I gathered that. Have you seen Mitzi? I want to give her the good news. The janitor shrugged. Maybe your dressing room. Sammy zipped down the hall and into his dressing room. The small, messy room was empty except for the diminutive man in the fedora. He was leaning against the wall, filing his nails. He stopped briefly to again tip his hat. Who the hell are you? Sammy walked up to the man. And where's Mitzi? Sorry, friend, but I get to ask the questions. The man slipped a spit-polished black .45 from his shoulder holster and shoved it against Sammy's forehead. And my first question is, would you like to take a walk? Thank you.
I have to ask one more time, is Laura Valeri in the house at all? Maybe? No? Okay. Well, then our final reader of this afternoon's event will be Julio Machado. Julio is a Cuban-American poet and fiction writer currently completing work on his first collection of poems. In his spare time, he enjoys medium-length walks, shopping at the Apple Store, and binge-watching new shows on Netflix. He received his undergraduate degree from Harvard University and completed his MFA at FIU in the spring of 2014. Some of his poems will appear in the winter issue of the Kenyon Review. Please welcome Julio.
Hi, everybody. So I've been hearing a lot lately about poetry voice, and it's this kind of breathy, low voice that poets adopt when they're reading their poems, and it's going to sound really philosophical. I'm going to try really hard not to read like that, but I can't help it. It's like a compulsive thing that we all do, so I can't really help it. This first poem is called Shopping for Apocalypse. It's minutes before doomsday, and I drive to Walmart. My bones are quivering. I need Tupperware, batteries, condoms, a spyglass to observe the meteoric decline of the heavens, a George Foreman grill for end times cuisine. But in the aisles, it's all hunting and murder, babies left asleep with the deli meats, mothers wielding AR-15s and strychnine, fathers warring over canned peaches and fishing line. In the distance, the indelicate, insistent whoomp of grenades and home decor and bedding. Self-help is overwhelmed by sinners, those poor, hopeless saps who don't know there are no gods in retail. I find myself with them shouting, save me, at the barricaded waif behind the counter while a stern, old-faced hero takes a baseball bat to the life-size cardboard cutouts of Tony Robbins. A great crash. The storefront collapses and a black, enormous volume of ocean water rushes in among glass and steel, wrecking and drowning, while outside the sky has caught fire at last. In the ruined still rivers of the aisles, we cling to floating bits of cheap particle board and Barbie dream houses, waving dollar bills in the air, begging to pay for something, anything. This one is called Nothing is New. A plucked rose on the windowsill in a Coke bottle. The bottle is clear glass and a precisely conceived shade of red that will not degrade. The rose is white. Atomic forces in the stem produce current. Water to steam, and then vapor climbing the shafts of sun through the window again and again. The illuminated Coke bottle is so beautiful it becomes a cathedral. Angels hide in the shadows. God stomps through the pews, which are blown to smithereens and then instantly reconstituted again and again. A single dark point in the water is a drowned spider. I will be that spider many lives from now. I will return to my own living room in my own time to die. I can almost understand. This one is Guzzle of Hungers. This is actually the one that's appearing in the Kenyon Review this winter, so look out for it. When my father saw his first moon, he surely believed it and himself untouchable. Now we know nothing is. All his rooms were vacant, and he knew loneliness was a kind of providence. We speak of his death casually. From this distance, the moonrise also seems like no great event. All of us are still sweating over beef and the right sort of attention. The mood in the market is ravenous. Thank you.
Thank you to our 7 alumni readers. We're so grateful for all of you being present, and please stay after for food and libations and the opportunity to talk to some of these folks and maybe have them sign your book. Thank you so much.